Mummy Curse is one of the newest releases from the Unique line released in the UX18 random booster. Being from the Unique line means that it has a gimmick. This gimmick is the blade switching from counter to guard form. Guard form is when its arm is inside, which is the otherwise default start position. Counter form is when the mummy's arm protrudes like it just got out of its sarcophagus, which happens at its faster or fastest rotations per minute or RPM. Counter form, though, is its strongest form, because in this mode, Mummy has the highest potential of turning a battle in its favor. This is because at Mummy's highest rotations per minute, it has the most destabilization potential. So while Mummy is rated pretty high on its defense, its attack is probably just as high as its defense in the early stages of the battle. Its destab potential decreases in guard mode, turning Mummy into a tank that now deflects blows to secure an outspin finish. So, when I first received the blade, I put the idea to the test, placing it on 360 Jolt and placed second at my local. But at the time, I didn't have the data to back up why I thought it was a good idea. So, I performed over 800 tests to see why it worked, and in this video, I'm going to show you what I found. First, let's talk about the blade. The Mummy I took with me weighed in at 37.5 grams. For comparison, my other meta bays, Wyvern weighed in at 34.8 and Wizard Rod weighed in at 35.8. So I knew from the get-go that Mummy Curse was built to take in hits and hopefully dish them. So, Mummy needs 3 things to do those 2 things effectively. A ratchet that assists its ability to destab opposing bays in the early game and tank hits in the late game. And a bit that focuses on what Mummy does best, with enough LED to support it later. And lastly, a strong launch along with a good launch technique, or in other words, strength and skill. As I said, Mummy's highest potential is in the beginning during its counterform, so it needs high RPMs. You can tell the difference between a powerful enough launch and a weaker launch by when you try to pick it up in the beginning. A strong launch results in a Mummy that's painful to pick up because the protruding arm is poking you, whereas a softer launch does not have that same effect. So for testing, I settled on starting with benchmark tests first, and this was against Wizard Rod 160 Hexa. This build, as many are probably aware of, is one of the strongest meta builds in the game that can consistently score 1 point. Though, not for just that reason, Rod represented the spot in my deck that my Mummy Curse would most likely go up against in a match, because at my locals, Rod would either be first or second in the deck, like where I would place my Mummy. If Mummy Curse is going to be successful, I needed to be able to steal some points off its natural enemy, a stamina type, albeit the strongest stamina type this game has ever seen. Though this Phase 1 was to find a viable build against Wizard Rod, Phase 2 involved testing those viable builds against other meta bays. All test battles were conducted using a flat launch with a string launcher and a launcher link, with the side that it landed on switching every 5 battles. I tested odd-numbered ratchet combinations on Jolt against Rod 10 times each and did the same for different ratchet configurations. These elements were essentially my raw testing strategy. If I found a ratchet successful and in a specific configuration, I tested different bit combinations ranging from defense, other attack bits, stamina bits, and balance bits. I had an additional caveat because I predicted that I would probably lose in raw testing the Rod in most cases. So if it had a 33.3% win rate or less, no further testing happened. If it had a win rate greater than 33.3%, it would be tested for 40 more battles. So with all that said, I went to work, starting with testing all odd-numbered ratchets with Jolt to measure ratchet differences. I avoided using even-numbered ratchets because I wanted to avoid as much burst risk as possible with the build. I did not do additional testing on stamina builds for the same reason that it would add unnecessary additional 40 battles against Wizard Rod. So enough of all that pretext yapping, let's get into what I found. First, let's talk about Phase 1, Round 1. Testing on defense builds with bits like Underneedle and Wedge unfortunately did not make the cut, though Wedge was slightly more viable with a win rate of 30%. Attack bits like Low Russian level performed on par with the Wedge build and Mummy Curse 160 Hexa, all of which had a 30% win rate, so they were all cut too. All ratchets except for 760 made the cut. While 760 is a good ratchet that increases Mummy's weight, the ratchet is better at increasing its defensive potential. In other words, buffing its guard form at best. But because Mummy is a defensive blade and Rod is a natural counter to defensive types, Mummy had less success on the ratchet during benchmarking. Overall, the 2 760 builds I tested, Jolt and Ball, had an equal 10% win rate. I also tested for height on some ratchets because I believed it would help with the destab potential of the build. all 70 heights I tested made it through, these being 170, 370, and 570. Round 1 left me with 13 build variations to test further. But as I said, I skipped further testing on stamina builds because I didn't want to sit there for such exciting battles that would happen 100 more times basically. But the result of what I found from round 1 is that 160 ball had a 50% win rate and 160 free ball had a 40% win rate, with 160 oriented away from the arm. Further testing is of course needed to deem them viable, but I'll let someone else handle that. So in round 2, I tested 11 builds 40 additional times. On round 1 of testing, 160 kick had a 40% win rate, but on round 2, it had a 20% win rate after 40 additional battles. So what seemed promising at first was quickly eliminated. 170, 360, 370, and 560 were eliminated as well because their win rate dropped to 30% or less. It's nice to see that my second place tournament build might have been what was the least viable option to go with. What made the cut was 570 Jolt with 3 sides of that ratchet pointed toward the arm at a 36% win rate, 960 Jolt at a 40% win rate, and 160 Jolt at a 42% win rate. I was hoping what I saw wasn't just exclusive to Jolt in the end, but I swear I gave the other bits a fair shake before I moved on. In Phase 2, the 3 different build variations were tested against 3 bays from the current meta top 10. These being Cobalt Dragoon 560 Elevate, Shark Scale 170 Low Rush, and Hover Wyvern 960 Kick. I only ran 10 battles for each build against each bay in Phase 2 because I was confident that Mummy could handle everything else in the meta just fine. However, Mummy Curse is practically unviable against 560 Elevate. The Dragoon combo is too much for these Mummy builds to overcome an attack bay built as a spin equalizing stamina type. Phase 2 showed several things. 570 was third with a 47% win rate in these matchups. 160 was second with a 53% win rate, and 960 was first with a 60% win rate. However, not including Cobalt Dragoon in these statistics, Mummy Curse 160 Jolt and 960 Jolt both had an 80% win rate across both Hover Wyvern and Shark Scale. So, with all that out of the way, here are my conclusions. 160 and 960 Jolt may be close to the best build for Mummy in this meta, because against Wizard Rod, it can win 40% of the time or more, or less, depending on how you play it. One nuance of being on Jolt though, is that the bit can get caught on the X-Rail gaps, leading to a Mummy that loses stamina quickly. So while I found combos that have a close to or greater than 40% win rate against Rod, the success might be just that Jolt is a really good bit. Aside from the bit, the ratchets have different functions. 160 helped the build get out of pockets and helped the blade's ability to destabilize opposing bays with the additional weight on the arm. 960 may have helped stabilize an otherwise unbalanced blade, maintaining its ability to destabilize for longer periods. 570, although the worst performing of the 3, may have helped the contact point to destabilize as I theorized. Though the reason Mummy saw this success was because of how well the early game turned out. The more it destabs early, the more successful it was against Rod. So it's very likely you'll have to tilt launch slightly against Rod to get those destab hits at the right place against Rod.
3, 2, 1, let it rip.
Some final thoughts. Mummy is probably one of the best defensive type bays released thus far, and takes the idea of what makes a defensive bay in a good direction. Beyblade X is a faster game than previous generations, and defensive bays thus far have relied on its ability to tank hits. For Mummy Curse though, its defensiveness as a tank is secondary to its true ability of a destabilizing attacker. In the case of this defensive bay, sometimes the best defense is offense. Thank you for watching. Please leave any comments down below and hit subscribe if you'd like to see more analytical Beyblade content or general Beyblade shenanigans.